He loved her more than anything, but she vanished without a trace. 10 years later, he found her in a wheelchair, his heart shattered, yet his love remained. Hi, my very loyal and beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Before we begin, I want to say a special prayer for each one of you. May your hearts always be filled with peace, joy, and love. May your days be filled with happiness and your nights with restful sleep. May all your dreams come true, and may you always feel the warmth of our beautiful family, no matter where you are. Now, how are you, my very beautiful family? I've poured my heart into this story. I worked 2 days on it, writing from the deepest part of me, and I truly hope you feel the love and passion behind every word. Please don't disappoint me. My watch time is slowly going down each day, but I know with your love and support, we can turn that around. Don't forget to like and comment on this video. Your feedback means the world to me. Let's take attendance. Are you present? If you are, let's start the story. The autumn breeze carried the scent of possibility as Julian Hayes stepped into Crescent Moon Cafe, seeking refuge from the endless parade of business meetings that defined his existence. At 32, he was the golden heir to Hayes International, a global conglomerate worth billions, with interests spanning technology, real estate, and sustainable energy. His tailored Italian suit and quietly confident demeanor typically drew attention. But here, in this artsy corner of New Orleans, no one seemed to care who he was. The anonymity felt like taking a full breath after years of shallow ones. Golden afternoon light spilled through the cafe's tall windows, illuminating floating dust motes that danced like tiny constellations. Julian chose a corner table beneath, a local artist's vibrant painting of the French Quarter at dusk. The cafe hummed with the gentle symphony of conversation and the rhythmic clinking of ceramic cups against saucers. Students hunched over laptops, artists sketched in worn notebooks, and writers typed furiously on keyboards, all existing in their own worlds, yet somehow connected in this warm, creative space that felt worlds away from his boardrooms and investment meetings. As he sipped his black coffee, letting the rich, bitter taste ground him in the present moment, Julian's attention was drawn to a flurry of movement near the counter. That's when he first saw her, Maya Bennett, balancing 3 ceramic mugs in one hand while sketching with the other. Her dark skin glowed under the cafe's warm lights, catching amber highlights that matched the pendant hanging at her throat. Her tightly coiled curls were pulled back with a colorful scarf that matched the splatters of paint on her well-worn overalls. She moved with a natural grace that reminded him of dancers, laughing with customers as she served them, her smile transforming her already beautiful face into something luminous, a beacon of authenticity in a world where Julian encountered so little of it. When a distracted customer bumped her arm, sending her sketchbook tumbling to Julian's feet, their eyes met for the first time. Her eyes were a deep brown with flecks of amber that caught the light, and they widened slightly in surprise at their sudden connection. A current of recognition passed between them, though they had never met. The instantaneous understanding between 2 souls who recognized something familiar in a stranger. "I believe this belongs to you," Julian said, retrieving her sketchbook. Before handing it back, he couldn't help but glance at the open page. A half-finished sketch of the cafe's street corner captured from an unusual angle that revealed both the historic architecture and the lives unfolding beneath it. The perspective was unexpected, almost challenging, showing not just the beauty of the buildings, but the contradictions of the city, wealth and poverty, history and modernity, joy and struggle, all coexisting in a single frame. "Fascinating perspective," he added thoughtfully. "You've captured the soul of the French Quarter, not just its facade." Maya looked at him suspiciously, then laughed, a rich, melodic sound that seemed to vibrate through him like a perfectly struck chord. "That's either the most pretentious line I've ever heard, or you actually know something about art." Julian smiled, feeling strangely seen in a way he rarely experienced in his carefully curated world. Yale art history, before my father reminded me that billionaires' sons don't become gallery curators, he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. He rarely revealed personal disappointments to anyone, let alone strangers. Maya studied. Him really looked at him in a way few people ever had, not as Julian Hayes, heir to a fortune whose value fluctuated daily on the stock market, but as a man with dreams and disappointments and a heart capable of appreciating beauty. "So what do billionaires' sons become?" she asked. No judgment in her voice, just genuine curiosity that invited confidences. "Empty," he answered again, with unexpected candor. The word hung between them, more revealing than any introduction could have been, a confession he hadn't made even to himself until this moment. She smiled then, a smile that would later haunt his dreams for a decade, and extended her hand. "I'm Maya Bennett, and I think we might have something to talk about." Her hand was warm, calloused from hours holding paintbrushes, and somehow it felt like the most genuine handshake he'd ever received. No agenda, no calculation, just the simple human connection that had become so rare in his world of strategic alliances and calculated networking. "Julian," he replied, deliberately omitting his last name, wanting to preserve this moment of being seen for himself rather than his lineage or net worth. "And I'd like that very much." Maya glanced at the clock hanging above the espresso machine. "My shift ends in 20 minutes, if you're not in a hurry." The invitation was casual, but her eyes held a question, perhaps recognizing as he did the rare spark of connection that deserved exploration. "I'll be here," Julian assured her, feeling as though something significant had just shifted in his carefully ordered universe. He watched as she returned to work, moving between tables with an ease that suggested complete comfort in her own skin. A quality Julian, despite all his advantages, had never fully achieved. When she returned, apron gone and a worn leather portfolio tucked under her arm, Julian discovered that Maya Bennett was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Born to a high school music teacher father and a mother who ran a community art program after immigrating from Ghana, she had grown up surrounded by creativity but also practical values. Her older sister Kira had married young and moved away, leaving Maya the artistic heart of her family. She was completing her MFA at Tulane on a partial scholarship, working at the cafe to cover the rest of her expenses, and volunteering teaching art to children in underserved neighborhoods. "Art should belong to everyone," she explained passionately as they shared a slice of pecan pie. Her hands moved expressively as she spoke, occasionally leaving faint smudges of charcoal on the table. "Not just hanging in the homes of people who can afford six-figure price tags or locked in museums that intimidate the very communities that could most benefit from creative expression." Instead of feeling indicted by her comments, Julian found himself nodding. "My mother used to say something similar. Before she died, she made my father promise to keep our collection accessible to the public at least part of the year. She believed great art needed to breathe, to be seen, to challenge, and comfort as many people as possible." Maya's expression softened. "And does he keep that promise?" "No," Julian admitted, feeling the familiar disappointment. "But I do. Every summer when he's in Europe, I open the East Wing Gallery to school groups and local artists. The household staff think it's my mother's ghost haunting him if he tries to stop the tradition." His smile was both mischievous and sad. That evening, closing time came and went as they remained in the corner of the cafe, discussing everything from Renaissance masters to local street artists. Maya challenged his conventional education with her vibrant perspectives on contemporary art and the importance of diverse voices in creative spaces, while Julian surprised her with his knowledge of art conservation techniques and historical contexts. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from art to literature, from childhood memories to future dreams, time dissolving around them as they discovered unexpected parallels in their vastly different lives. "I always imagined living in Paris for a year," Maya confessed, absent-mindedly sketching Julian's hands on a napkin as they talked. "Sketching at the Louvre, painting along the Seine, getting lost in narrow streets that have inspired artists for centuries." "Why haven't you gone?" Julian asked, mesmerized by the way her pencil captured the essence of his hands with just a few confident strokes. Her laugh was softer now, tinged with pragmatism. Student loans, family responsibilities, reality. She shrugged, her momentary vulnerability quickly masked by a smile. "Dreams are free. Plane tickets and Parisian apartments aren't." As the cafe owner jingled his keys meaningfully, they finally stepped out into the night air. The streets of New Orleans had transformed, now bathed in the golden glow of old lamps and vibrant with music drifting from nearby jazz clubs. Standing on the sidewalk, Julian felt an unfamiliar reluctance to end their evening, a longing to continue this conversation that had awakened parts of himself he had nearly forgotten existed. "I'd like to see more of your work," he said, aware he was really asking for more of her time, her perspective, her presence, that somehow made the world seem more vivid. "If you'd be willing to show me." Maya considered him for a long moment, her artist's eyes seeming to see beneath surfaces to the truth of things. Then she nodded, reaching into her bag for a simple flyer. "There's a student exhibition next week at the Marguerite Gallery, 7 to 9 on Thursday." She handed him the paper, their fingers brushing briefly. "My pieces probably won't sell, but the curator said having them in the show elevates the whole collection." Her smile turned self-deprecating, whatever that means. "It means your work has integrity," Julian said without hesitation. "Commercial appeal can be manufactured. Authenticity can't." Under the streetlight, a subtle blush darkened Maya's cheeks, making her even more beautiful. "You're not what I expected, Julian no last name. Is that good or bad?" "I haven't decided yet," she replied with a playful smile that contained a hint of something deeper. "Good night, Julian." She turned and walked away, her silhouette growing smaller against the colorful backdrop of the French Quarter. For the first time in years, Julian Hayes, whose name appeared regularly in financial journals and society pages, felt seen for who he truly was, not for the weight of the legacy he carried. As he walked back to his car, the city seemed somehow more vibrant, the air sweeter, colors more intense, as if Maya Bennett had adjusted the contrast on his world with their single conversation. He knew, with a certainty that should have frightened him, that he would be at that gallery on Thursday night, and every day after that, if she would allow it. Something fundamental had shifted, like tectonic plates realigning deep beneath the surface of his carefully constructed life. In a single evening, in a chance encounter that felt somehow inevitable, he had discovered what had been missing, not just art or passion, but authenticity, the feeling of being truly alive. Chapter 2. Falling deeply. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. Julian's penthouse overlooked the city like a kingdom, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Mississippi River and the historic skyline. In a vista that graced architectural magazines, the space was elegantly minimal, Italian furniture chosen for its clean lines, art displayed with museum precision, everything in perfect order. Professional cleaners maintained this perfection 3 times weekly, ensuring no evidence remained of the human who actually lived there. It was a showplace rather than a home, curated by renowned designers who had created a space that impressed visitors but provided Julian little comfort. In contrast, Maya's apartment above her cousin's jazz club pulsed with music and life at all hours. Here, creativity reigned over order. The walls adorned with her own paintings and those traded with fellow artists, furniture salvaged from thrift stores and lovingly restored, windows draped with vibrant fabrics from her mother's. Native Ghana, books overflowed mismatched shelves. Plants thrived in the abundant light, and the small balcony overlooking Frenchman Street served as both her summer studio and gathering place for friends who often drifted up from the club below. Yet, over the next 6 months, these worlds began to intertwine in ways neither had anticipated, creating something new and precious between them. On the night of Maya's exhibition, Julian arrived early, deliberately dressed down in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt to avoid drawing attention. He wanted to see her work before she saw him, to experience it without her watching for his reaction. The Marguerite Gallery was small but well respected in the local art scene, known for discovering emerging talent that larger institutions often overlooked. Julian moved slowly through the space, champagne flute untouched in his hand, until he found himself standing before a series of 3 canvases that seemed to vibrate with an energy that drew him closer. The paintings captured New Orleans in a way he'd never seen, not the tourist version of the city, but its beating heart. One showed an elderly street musician, his weathered hands on a trumpet, the background blurring into a kaleidoscope of colors that somehow translated the sound of jazz into visual form. Another depicted a second-line parade, the joy and community, spirit palpable in every brushstroke. The third was more abstract, layers of blue and gold suggesting the meeting of sky and river, with tiny human figures finding their place in the vastness. Together, they told a story of a city both wounded and healing, both ancient and being constantly reborn. "What do you think?" Her voice behind him was tentative, nothing like the confident woman he'd met at the cafe. Julian turned to find Maya in a simple emerald dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly, her natural hair framing her face like a halo. She looked both elegant and entirely herself. No pretension, no attempt to be anyone but who she was. "I think," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "that you see the world as it should be seen, with all its complexity, beauty, and contradiction. These aren't just paintings, Maya, they're truths." The vulnerability in her expression gave way to quiet pride. "Thank you for coming," she said, "and for actually looking at the art. Most people are just here for the free champagne and networking." As the evening progressed, Julian stood back, watching Maya interact with gallery patrons and fellow artists. He noted how she genuinely listened to feedback, defending her artistic choices without arrogance when challenged by a particularly pretentious critic, her passion evident in every gesture. When a wealthy collector expressed interest in her second-line painting, Julian resisted the urge to buy all 3 canvases himself. She deserved recognition on her own merit, not through his intervention. Later, as the event wound down, Maya found him again, her eyes bright with the success of the evening. "Some of us are going to Bellamy's for late dinner. Would you like to join?" The invitation was casual, but her eyes held a question. Was this just a one-time connection, or the beginning of something more? Julian smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I'd like that very much." That night marked the beginning of their journey together. Over steaming plates of gumbo and shared bottles of wine, Julian was introduced to Maya's circle, fellow artists, musicians, writers, and community activists who initially regarded him with suspicion but gradually accepted him as they realized he was genuinely interested in their work and ideas, not just in Maya. In the months that followed, Julian discovered the New Orleans that existed beyond tourist attractions and business meetings, the corner restaurants where chefs knew Maya by name and added extra spice to her gumbo, the hidden jazz clubs where musicians invited her to paint. Backstage during their sets, the community gardens, where she volunteered teaching art to children who called her Miss Maya with adoration. He learned the geography of a city he had lived in for years, but never truly seen, mapped by the places that held meaning for her. In turn, Julian began to share pieces of himself he'd long kept hidden. On rainy Sundays, they explored his private art collection, where Maya would challenge his conventional tastes with passionate arguments for emerging artists who broke boundaries of form and concept. "Art isn't meant to match your furniture," she'd tease, dragging him to underground exhibitions in converted warehouses where his Italian loafers stood out among combat boots and sneakers. At one such event, when a pierced gallery owner with vivid blue hair mistook Julian for Maya's corporate boyfriend slumming it in the art world, she defended him fiercely. "Julian understands artistic integrity better than half the people here," she'd stated, loud enough for others to hear. "He just happens to wear better shoes." That night, walking along the moonlit river, Julian confessed, "No one's ever stood up for me like that before." Maya stopped, looking genuinely surprised. "Really? But you're rich, connected, Hayes International's heir?" His smile was sad. "People stand up to impress me, not for me. There's a difference." Maya took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Then they don't see you at all." This became the foundation of their connection, the gift of being truly seen and accepted. Gradually, the barriers between their worlds dissolved. Julian began leaving suits in Maya's tiny closet, while her paintbrushes and sketchbooks found permanent homes on his Italian marble countertops. They developed rituals, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market where Julian learned to haggle under Maya's laughing guidance, Sunday brunches with Maya's boisterous family where he was taught to play spades, badly, quiet evenings where she sketched while he read aloud from novels they both loved. They discovered parallel childhood wounds, Julian's emotional neglect by parents too focused on empire building to notice their son's artistic sensitivity. Maya's struggle with teachers who tried to force her vibrant, boundless creativity into conventional channels. They healed each other in small ways neither had realized they needed, creating a sanctuary in their connection where both could be fully themselves. For her birthday in April, Julian rented a private gallery where he had secretly installed an exhibition of Maya's work. Pieces she'd never had the confidence to show publicly, including her most personal paintings that explored her identity as a black woman artist in America. As she moved from canvas to canvas, tears streaming down her face, he stood back, watching her realize how others might see her gift, not through the lens of commercial viability or academic trends, but through the impact her vision could have on those who experienced it. "How did you get these?" she whispered, touching the frame of a particularly vulnerable self-portrait she'd kept hidden beneath her bed. "Your roommate helped," Julian admitted. "I wanted you to see what I see, an artist whose voice matters, whose perspective changes how people understand the world." Later that night, as they slow danced among her paintings to the music of a string quartet he'd hired, Maya whispered, "You make me brave." And Julian knew he'd never loved anyone as he loved her, completely, without reservation or condition. Maya brought Julian into her vibrant community. Sunday dinners at her family's modest home in the 7th Ward became his sanctuary. The 2-story house with its peeling paint and front porch swing contained more warmth and genuine joy than any space he'd ever known. Maya's father, Samuel, a high school music teacher with the same expressive eyes as his daughter, treated Julian with the same respectful warmth he showed everyone. Her mother, Josephine, initially reserved with the billionaire dating her daughter, softened when she discovered Julian's knowledge of and respect for Ghanaian art traditions. "My mother taught me that a person who respects another's culture is worthy of trust," she told him one evening as she showed him her collection of kente, cloth, and explained the meaning behind the patterns. You listen with your heart, not just your ears. Maya's brothers, Marcus, the community organizer who viewed Julian's wealth with initial suspicion, and Daniel, the medical student working his way through school with multiple jobs, teased Julian mercilessly about his inability to handle Josephine's spicy jollof rice until he learned to tease back, earning their respect. Her sister Kira visited occasionally with her husband Marcus, a successful import-export businessman whose flashy lifestyle contrasted sharply with the Bennett family's modest warmth. Julian noticed the tension Kira's husband brought into the household, but said nothing, respecting the family's private dynamics. But it was Maya's grandmother, Nana Ruby, whose approval meant the most. The ancient matriarch with knowing eyes watched them carefully for months before finally beckoning Julian to the porch swing one evening while Maya helped in the kitchen. "You sit with me, young man," she said, patting the space beside her. Her accent still carried traces of her Louisiana Bayou upbringing, even after decades in the city. "These old eyes haven't had enough of you yet." Julian sat, respectful and slightly nervous. Nana Ruby had lived through segregation, had marched for civil rights, had raised 3 children as a widow, and had the quiet dignity of someone who had fought battles most could never imagine. Her approval wasn't given lightly, and Julian felt its importance. "You love my Maya," she stated simply, not a question. "Yes, ma'am, more than I knew was possible." The honesty came easily with her. Nana Ruby nodded, her gaze moving to the street where neighborhood children played. "Not everyone will understand. You know that, yes?" Julian nodded. He'd already experienced the sideways glances, the assumptions made about their relationship, the veiled comments from business associates, the more direct ones from Maya's extended family. The world had opinions about love that crossed lines, of race and class. The world has opinions about love that crosses the lines they've drawn, she continued, echoing his thoughts with uncanny accuracy. "You both will need to be stronger for it." "We will be," Julian said, with quiet certainty. Nana Ruby studied him, her eyes missing nothing. "You two are old souls finding each other again," she said finally, her weathered hand patting his. "I've seen how you look at my grandbaby, not like she's a treasure to possess, but like she's the sun you've been turning toward your whole life." Julian swallowed hard, moved by her perception. "I never knew it could feel like this." "That's because real love isn't what they sell us in those fancy movies," Nana Ruby nodded. "Love isn't about grand gestures, son. It's about choosing each other in 1,000 small ways, every day." She fixed him with a penetrating gaze. "Will you choose her even when it's hard?" "Every time," Julian promised, not knowing then how severely that promise would be tested. The following week, Julian took Maya to meet his father, Richard Hayes, at the family's Garden District mansion. The evening was every bit as difficult. As Julian had feared, Richard was coldly polite, asking pointed questions about Maya's family and career prospects while making it clear he viewed her artistic pursuits as a hobby rather than a profession. Throughout dinner in the formal dining room that had hosted presidents and royalty, he made subtle references to Julian's previous girlfriends, all daughters of business associates or political allies, all chosen for their social connections, rather than compatibility with his son. "And what are your intentions with my son?" Richard finally asked over dessert, his tone suggesting no answer would be satisfactory. Before Julian could intervene, Maya set down her fork, met Richard's gaze directly, and replied, "To love him for who he is, not for what he owns or represents. To support his dreams, even the ones you dismissed. To create a life with him built on mutual respect and understanding." She paused. "But if you're asking if I plan to take advantage of his wealth or status, Mr. Hayes, the answer is no. I was raised to stand on my own feet." The silence that followed was broken by Julian reaching for Maya's hand, and that's exactly why I love her, father. Later, as they drove back to Maya's apartment, Julian apologized for his father's behavior. "Don't," Maya said softly. "We both knew it wouldn't be easy, but we're worth fighting for, aren't we?" Julian pulled the car over, turned to her in the glow of streetlights, and kissed her with all the love and certainty he felt. "You're the best fight I'll ever have," he whispered against her lips. By their first anniversary, they had become a team navigating both worlds, attending black-tie charity events where Julian proudly introduced Maya as an artist, not just his girlfriend, and camping out on the floor of a converted warehouse when one of Maya's sculptures was featured in a midnight show on the city's outskirts. They learned each other's languages, defended each other's dreams, and built a love grounded in mutual respect and genuine understanding. When Julian was offered the chance to oversee Hayes International's expansion into sustainable energy, requiring months of travel, Maya encouraged him despite the separation it would mean. "Your passion for ethical business practices needs to be in that boardroom," she insisted. "Go change your father's company from the inside." And when Maya was invited to contribute to a major exhibition exploring contemporary black artists' perspectives, Julian rearranged international meetings to be there on opening night, standing proudly as critics praised her unflinching examination of identity and belonging. In quiet moments, they began to speak of the future, of building a life that honored both their paths, of children who would inherit Maya's creativity and Julian's sense of responsibility, of a foundation to support arts education in underserved communities. Their love had become a bridge between worlds, stronger for the differences it spanned. As their second anniversary approached, Julian knew with bone-deep certainty that Maya Bennett was his future. The question wasn't if he would ask her to marry him, but how to propose in a way that honored the unique, beautiful love they had built together. A love that had transformed them both. Chapter 3. The Proposal. After 2 years together, Julian knew Maya was his forever. The realization didn't come as a lightning bolt, but as a quiet certainty, like dawn breaking slowly over the horizon. She had transformed his life from a carefully constructed facade into something authentic and vibrant. In her presence, he was not the Hayes heir, but simply Julian, a man with dreams and vulnerabilities and a heart capable of profound love. In secret, he picked up paintbrushes again, renting a small studio in the arts district under a false name. His assistant was sworn to secrecy about the blocks of time that disappeared from his schedule, marked only as personal project. For months, he worked there, fingers stained with colors, sometimes working through the night when inspiration seized him. His hands, once skillful only with contracts and handshakes, created 14 paintings that told their love story. Each canvas captured a moment that had defined them. Their first meeting at the cafe, Maya laughing as rain soaked them during an impromptu dance on her rooftop. The weekend they got lost in the bayou and found a hidden chapel. The night she held him as he grieved after a heated argument with his father. Julian poured everything into these paintings, not just memories, but emotions, his untrained technique made powerful by raw honesty. The process reconnected him with the artistic passion he had abandoned years ago, and he found himself remembering his mother's words, "Art is how we make visible the invisible things that matter most." Through his clumsy but heartfelt brushstrokes, he was making visible the love that had changed everything. Sometimes he would return to Maya's apartment with paint still embedded in his fingernails, blaming renovation projects at one of his properties. She would look at him curiously, sometimes running her fingers over his paint-stained hands with a knowing smile, but never pressed, respecting his privacy just as he respected hers. What Maya didn't know was that Julian had also visited her father, asking not for permission, for Maya would have hated that outdated tradition, but for blessing. They'd met at Samuel Bennett's favorite jazz club, a hole-in-the-wall place where the music was authentic and the drinks strong. Over bourbon neat, Julian had explained his intentions. "She's her own woman," Samuel had said, eyes crinkling with warmth. "Has been since she was 5 years old and told her kindergarten teacher that the sky didn't have to be blue in her paintings. But if you're asking if I think you're worthy of her..." He paused, studying Julian with the same penetrating gaze Maya had inherited. "I think you might be the one person who truly sees her, and that's all any father wants for his daughter." He'd raised his glass then, to the man brave enough to love Maya Bennett exactly as she is. Meanwhile, Maya fought her own battles in the art world. The prestigious Whitney Museum had expressed interest in her work for an upcoming exhibition of emerging artists, but the curator had suggested she tone down the cultural elements to appeal to a broader audience. The implication was clear: make her art less distinctly black, less authentically her voice. They loved the technique, the composition, the emotional impact, she told Julian one evening as they walked along the river, just not the ethnic specificity, as they called it, as if my perspective is something to be diluted rather than celebrated. Julian heard the hurt beneath her anger, the familiar struggle of being asked to make herself smaller, less distinctive, to fit someone else's comfort level. "What did you say to them?" he asked, though he already knew. Maya Bennett did not compromise her truth. "I said thank you for the opportunity," she replied, her voice steady despite the pain, "and that I'd consider their feedback." She stopped, walking, turning to face the water. "Then this morning I called and withdrew my work from consideration." Julian studied her profile against the sunset, pride swelling in his chest. "That took courage." "Or stupidity," Maya said with a fragile smile. "That exhibition could have opened doors, been a turning point." "Any door that requires you to be less than who you are isn't worth walking through," Julian said quietly, taking her hand. "Your integrity is one of the reasons I love you." That evening, Maya discovered an anonymous donor had funded a solo exhibition of her work at a respected Black-owned gallery. Though Julian never confirmed he was behind it, the timing wasn't coincidental. He didn't try to solve her problems. He simply created space for her to succeed on her own terms. His support of her principles, rather than pressure to compromise for career advancement, cemented Maya's certainty that Julian was her future. On a spring evening scented with jasmine, Julian asked Maya to accompany him to a private viewing at a small gallery owned by a friend. "It's an emerging artist I think you'll appreciate," he said casually as they dressed. Maya wore a simple blue dress that made her skin glow, unaware this night would change their lives. When they arrived at the gallery, Julian led a confused Maya to the entrance, where his friend waited with a silk scarf. "It's an immersive exhibition," Julian explained as the gallery owner offered the blindfold. "Trust me." With a curious smile, Maya nodded, allowing the soft silk to cover her eyes. Julian guided her carefully inside, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the flowers he'd arranged throughout the space. When they reached the center of the gallery, he positioned her carefully and took a deep breath. "Ready?" he asked, his voice betraying a rare nervousness. "Always," she replied, her blindfolded face turned toward his voice with complete trust. Julian removed the blindfold, watching as Maya blinked in the soft lighting. Around them hung his 14 paintings, each illuminated perfectly, creating a timeline of their relationship. For a moment she didn't understand, looking at the first painting with professional interest until recognition dawned in her eyes. "Julian?" she whispered, turning to him in confusion before moving slowly to the next canvas. As realization swept over her, tears filled her eyes. She moved from painting to painting in silent wonder, occasionally reaching out to touch a brushstroke as if confirming it was real. "You did these? All of these?" she asked, her voice breaking with emotion. Julian nodded, his throat tight. "You made me remember who I was meant to be. The man who loves art as much as business. The man who sees beauty in unexpected places." He swallowed hard. "The man who is capable of loving completely." When she reached the final painting, she stopped, hand flying to her mouth. Unlike the others, this canvas showed not the past, but a future. Two hands intertwined against a backdrop of blended colors that suggested both their worlds merged into one. And there, painted with painstaking detail that had taken him dozens of attempts to perfect, was a ring. As Maya turned, Julian was already on one knee, holding out a small velvet box containing the actual ring he had painted. A cushion cut, diamonds surrounded by sapphires, the exact color of the dress she'd worn on their first official date, set in platinum that echoed the silver moonlight of the night. They had first said, "I love you." "Maya Bennett," he said, his voice steady, despite his racing heart. "Before you I existed but didn't truly live. You've shown me what it means to live fully, to create boldly, to love completely." He took a breath. "Will you marry me? Will you continue creating this masterpiece of a life with me?" Tears streamed freely down Maya's face as she nodded, pulling him to his feet. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. What followed was a moment of pure joy, their embrace illuminated by the paintings that told their story, past, present, and now future. When they finally drew apart, Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, both of them laughing as his hands trembled slightly. "I never thought I could be this happy," Maya confessed, looking from the ring to his face with wonder. "This is just the beginning," Julian promised, kissing her again. That night, they celebrated with both families at Nana Ruby's home, the small house overflowing with laughter and music. Julian had arranged for champagne and catering, but it was Josephine's homemade coconut cake that became the centerpiece of the celebration. Maya's brothers teased Julian mercilessly about his secret art career, while her cousins demanded to know which painting had been the hardest to create. The proposal won, Julian admitted, arms securely around Maya's waist. "I wanted it to be perfect." "Nothing's perfect," Maya's father said, raising his glass in a toast, "except perhaps finding someone who sees you clearly and loves you completely." Even Julian's father attended, bringing an expensive bottle of champagne and a reluctant acceptance that his son had chosen his own path to happiness. When Richard Hayes awkwardly kissed Maya's cheek and whispered, "He's a better man with you," she knew it was the closest thing to approval they would receive. Among the guests was Kira, watching her sister's happiness with a strange, distant expression that Maya later confided troubled her. "She and Marcus have been fighting," she told Julian. "I'm worried about her." As fireflies danced in the garden and music played inside, Julian and Maya slipped away to the porch swing, seeking a moment of quiet. Under the Louisiana stars, they spoke of dreams and plans, their fingers intertwined, just like in Julian's painting. "I want a wedding that honors both our worlds," Julian said, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Something elegant, but not pretentious. Something that feels like us." Maya nestled against him, her engagement ring catching the starlight. "I already know where. St. Michael's Cathedral. My parents married there, and Nana Ruby says it's where souls find their true paths." She smiled. "Plus, the light through those stained glass windows will be incredible in photographs." Julian laughed softly. "Always the artist, even when planning our wedding." He kissed her forehead. "St. Michael's it is, and I promise when I see you walking down that aisle, it will be the beginning of our greatest adventure." Neither could Have imagined then how their path would twist, or that the cathedral would stand empty on their wedding day, or that a decade would pass before they found each other again. In that moment, wrapped in each other's arms on a creaking porch swing, their future seemed as bright and clear as the diamond on Maya's finger, a promise of forever that nothing could break. In the months that followed, their lives became a whirlwind of wedding preparations. They chose a date in September when the Louisiana heat would begin to soften and the light would be perfect for the photographs Maya envisioned. Together, they created invitations that combined Julian's preference for elegant simplicity with Maya's artistic flair, handmade paper embedded with wildflower seeds that guests could plant after the wedding, a symbol of the new life they were beginning together. Maya designed her own dress with the help of a local seamstress, incorporating elements from her mother's Ghanaian heritage alongside contemporary lines. Julian found himself unexpectedly invested in the details, not the expensive trappings his father suggested were necessary for a Hayes wedding, but the meaningful touches that would make the day uniquely theirs. "I never thought I'd care about wedding cake flavors," he admitted one evening as they tasted samples in Maya's kitchen, icing smudged on his chin. "You care because it matters to us, not to impress anyone else," Maya said, smiling as she wiped away the icing. "That's the difference." As their wedding day approached, they moved through moments both mundane and profound, with the certainty of two people who had found their home in each other. They registered for art books instead of fine china, planned a honeymoon that combined Julian's love of historic architecture with Maya's desire to paint in new locations, discussed the house they would build together, somewhere between his world and hers, with studio space filled with light and gardens where future children could play. A week before the wedding, Julian surprised Maya with one last gift: the deed to a century-old building in the arts district that they had often admired, now renovated into community studio spaces for artists who couldn't afford their own. The top floor would be Maya's professional studio. "For when you need space to create without tripping over me," he told her, watching as she explored the light-filled rooms with wonder. "It's perfect," she whispered, "just like everything with you." On their final night as an engaged couple, they dined alone on Maya's balcony, sharing memories and dreams under the stars. As midnight approached, Julian reluctantly prepared to leave. They had agreed to spend their last unmarried night apart, honoring Nana Ruby's insistence on at least one traditional element. At the door, Maya held him close one last moment. "Tomorrow I'll be waiting for you at the altar," she promised, "ready to begin forever." Julian kissed her tenderly. "I'll be the one unable to take my eyes off you," he replied. "I love you, Maya Bennett. Tonight, tomorrow, always." They parted with the sweet certainty that the next time they saw each other would be at St. Michael's Cathedral, the moment they had been moving toward since that first conversation at Crescent Moon Cafe. Chapter 4. The Empty Church. The wedding day dawned perfect. September sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, transforming St. Michael's Cathedral into a kaleidoscope of colors. White roses and calla lilies adorned every pew, their subtle fragrance filling the air. A string quartet played softly as guests arrived, Maya's large, extended family in vibrant traditional fabrics, alongside Julian's business associates in designer suits, a visual representation of their bridged worlds. Julian stood at the altar, heart racing beneath his tailored tuxedo. His best man, a childhood friend who had watched him transform under Maya's love, gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "She'll take your breath away," he whispered, and Julian nodded, imagining Maya walking toward him, radiant in her wedding gown. The cathedral's soaring ceilings and ancient stone walls seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the building itself were a living witness to the love about to be consecrated within it. In the bridal suite, Maya's dress hung ready. an elegant creation of ivory silk with delicate beadwork that honored her mother's Ghanaian heritage. Her bridesmaids, including her older sister Kira, had helped with her makeup and arranged her hair with tiny white flowers. Everything was perfect. Maya glowed with happiness, occasionally touching her engagement ring as if to reassure herself this wasn't a dream. Kira had been unusually quiet all morning, checking her phone frequently, but Maya was too excited to notice anything amiss. "Almost time," her father said, appearing at the door in his first ever tuxedo, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You look like an angel, baby girl." Maya embraced him, careful not to smudge her makeup. "I've never been happier, Daddy." As Samuel Bennett stepped out to give his daughter a final moment of peace before the ceremony, Maya stood before the antique mirror, taking in her reflection. She barely recognized herself, not because of the elegant dress or carefully applied makeup, but because of the profound joy radiating from within. This was the beginning of the life she had dreamed of, with the man who had shown her what love truly meant. Then came the phone call that changed everything. The ringtone cut through the peaceful moment. Not her regular phone, but the second, backup phone she kept for emergencies. Only family had that number. With a frown, Maya answered, expecting perhaps a last-minute question from one of her cousins. "Hello?" A man's voice, unfamiliar and official, responded. "Is this Maya Bennett?" "Yes," she replied, unease beginning to creep through her happiness. "Who is this?" "Agent Daniel Sullivan, FBI. I need to speak with you immediately in person. It's a matter of life and death." Maya's first thought was that this must be a mistake, or perhaps one of Julian's friends playing an ill-timed prank. "I'm getting married in 30 minutes, whatever this is." "It concerns your fiancé, Julian Hayes," the voice interrupted, "and your sister's husband, Marcus. If you want to keep Mr. Hayes alive, you need to meet me now, alone." The blood drained from Maya's face as the agent gave an address just blocks from the cathedral. Something in his tone convinced her this was no prank. With trembling hands, she ended the call and stood frozen, mind racing. Without fully understanding why, Maya grabbed her purse and rushed out, telling her confused bridesmaids she needed a moment alone. "Wedding jitters," she forced a smile. "I just need 5 minutes to collect myself." Through the window, they watched as she climbed into a taxi and disappeared, expected to return shortly to prepare for her walk down the aisle. But minutes turned to a quarter hour, then half an hour, and Maya did not return. Her bridesmaids tried her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Whispers of concern began to spread. At the altar, Julian checked his watch, then smiled reassuringly at the guests as 1 o'clock became 1:30, then 2. Calls to Maya's phone went straight to voicemail. Her bridesmaids reported what little they knew. She had received a call, grabbed her purse, and left in a taxi without explanation. As whispers rippled through the cathedral, Julian stood firm, his face a mask of calm, even as panic clawed at his chest. He moved to confer with Maya's father in hushed tones near the side altar. "She wouldn't leave without reason," he insisted when Samuel looked stricken. "Something must have happened. We need to find her." Richard Hayes approached, his expression a mixture of concern and something like vindication. "Son, perhaps it's time to acknowledge the situation. Send the guests home. This is becoming embarrassing." Julian's eyes flashed with a rare anger directed at his father. "This isn't about embarrassment. The woman I love is missing. Something is wrong." He turned to Samuel. "Check your house, her apartment, the studio, anywhere she might have gone. I'll call hospitals." But as the afternoon wore on, the cathedral slowly emptied. Maya's father and brothers left to search her apartment, the cafe, her studio, all the places she might have gone. They returned grim-faced. Her apartment was empty, drawers half open as if she had packed in a hurry. Her phone was found in a trash can 2 blocks from the cathedral. By evening, only Julian's closest friends, Maya's immediate family, and a handful of determined relatives remained, gathered in tense groups around the cathedral. Police had been called, but explained that an adult choosing to leave their own wedding, however heartbreaking, wasn't a crime. They took information, but provided little hope of immediate action. As dusk fell, Julian remained in the empty church, still in his wedding suit, the flowers wilting around him. The stained glass windows that had sparkled with such promise at dawn now darkened into somber shadows. He sat in the front pew, head bowed, trying to make sense of a day that had begun with such joy and now ended in confusion and fear. "I don't understand," he whispered to Nana Ruby, who had stayed with him even after everyone else left. "She wouldn't just disappear, not Maya, not without telling me." The elderly woman took his hand, her fingers gnarled with arthritis, but still strong. Her eyes, which had witnessed almost a century of life's joys and sorrows, were filled with a sorrow that matched his own. "Sometimes life takes us on paths we never expected, child. But if your love is as strong as I believe it is, those paths will cross again." "Did she say anything to you?" Julian asked, desperate for any clue. "Was she afraid? Having doubts?" "Nana." Ruby shook her head slowly. "That girl loved you with every fiber of her being. Something powerful must have happened to take her away on this day of all days." Julian looked up, determination hardening his features as he rose to his feet. "I'll find her. Whatever happened, wherever she is, I'll find her." His voice echoed in the empty cathedral like a vow. "I promise you that." He couldn't have known then that despite his resources, his determination, and his unwavering love, a decade would pass before he saw Maya again. And that when he did, the mystery of her disappearance would be even more heartbreaking than he could have imagined. In the deepening shadows of St. Michael's Cathedral, on what should have been the happiest day of his life, Julian Hayes made a promise that would define the next 10 years of his existence: to find the woman who had vanished with his heart. The days following Maya's disappearance blurred into a nightmare for Julian. He hired the best private investigators, offered substantial rewards for information, and personally visited every hospital in a 100-mile radius. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford. Food, a necessity he barely remembered. She couldn't have just vanished, he insisted during tense meetings with detectives in his penthouse, now transformed into a command center with maps, timelines, and photos of Maya covering every surface. People don't disappear without leaving traces. But Maya had. Her passport was missing, though no record existed of her boarding any flights. Her bank accounts showed a single large withdrawal the morning of the wedding, then nothing. Her phone records revealed the final call had come from a burner phone, impossible to trace. As weeks stretched into months, Julian's search expanded. He traveled to Ghana, believing Maya might have sought refuge with her mother's relatives, only to find they were as baffled and heartbroken as he was. He pursued leads in Paris, remembering her dream of living there, and in every major city with a vibrant art scene where a talented painter might start fresh. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, Julian received his first potential lead. A gallery owner in Montreal reported seeing a woman matching Maya's description at an exhibition. Julian flew there immediately, hope surging for the first time in months. The security footage was grainy, but showed a woman with Maya's build and graceful movements. She wore a headscarf and dark glasses, but something in the way she tilted her head to study a painting was achingly familiar. When Julian tried to locate her through the gallery's records, he discovered she had paid cash for a small landscape and left no contact information. "She's alive," he whispered, touching the screen. "She's okay." The relief nearly brought him to his knees before new questions arose. Why had she left? Why was she hiding? Was she in danger, or had she chosen to leave him? The breakthrough came a year into his search, when Julian discovered Maya's student loans had been mysteriously paid in full just days after her disappearance. Further investigation revealed an anonymous donation had covered Nana Ruby's medical expenses for specialized treatments she'd needed but couldn't afford. She didn't just run away, Julian told Maya's father during a late-night conversation, on the same porch where he had once promised to always choose Maya. Someone gave her money, a lot of money, and she used it to take care of the people she loves. Samuel Bennett nodded slowly. The question is, what did they want in return? The answer remained elusive, but Julian's search gained new purpose. If Maya had made some kind of sacrifice to protect or provide for her family, perhaps she had also protected him in some way. He began investigating his business rivals, looking for connections between Hayes International and Maya's disappearance. Meanwhile, life continued around him. Hayes International required his leadership, especially after his father suffered a minor stroke and stepped back from daily operations. Julian ran the company with ruthless efficiency while privately funding an expanding network of people searching for Maya. He maintained a foundation in her name that supported young artists from underserved communities, hoping somehow the publicity might reach her. 5 years after Maya vanished, Julian received a package containing only a small painting, a New Orleans cityscape in a style he would recognize anywhere. No note, no return address, just a postmark from Buenos Aires. He flew there immediately, but found no trace of her. Yet the painting confirmed what his heart had never doubted. Maya was alive. And perhaps, in her own way, she was reaching out. Chapter 6. Years of Shadows. As the 5th year of Maya's absence slipped into the 6th, Julian lived 2 distinct lives. Publicly, he was the brilliant, driven CEO who had transformed Hayes International into a leader in sustainable development. Business magazines featured him on their covers, praising his innovation and philanthropy. Women pursued him at every charity gala and industry event, drawn to his wealth, power, and the mysterious sadness that seemed to make him even more attractive. But privately, Julian remained frozen in time, a man waiting for his life to resume. His penthouse contained a studio where Maya's unfinished paintings remained exactly as she had left them. A dedicated, secure server stored every piece of information about her disappearance, every potential sighting, every lead, no matter how small. "You need to consider moving forward," his father told him during a rare moment of vulnerability as they shared a drink on Richard's 70th birthday. Maya made her choice. Julian shook his head. "You never understood what we had, what we still have." Richard Hayes studied his son over the rim of his glass. "What you had was real. I admit, I was wrong about her, but son, holding on to a ghost isn't living." But Julian couldn't let go, especially after receiving 3 more anonymous paintings over the years. One postmarked from Sao Paulo, another from Bangkok, the 3rd from Cape Town. Each showed a landscape from the respective city, but hidden. In each was a small symbol only Julian would recognize, a constellation he and Maya had identified as theirs on a night spent stargazing in the bayou. These paintings confirmed his suspicion that Maya was constantly moving, staying nowhere, long enough to be found. But why? And more importantly, was she running from something or someone? The question haunted him, driving his search even as it evolved into a more sophisticated network of art world contacts who knew to alert him if they encountered an artist with Maya's distinctive style. 7 years after the wedding day, Julian discovered that a woman using the name Marie Benoit had enrolled in a prestigious art program in Tokyo 3 years earlier. The application included a portfolio with work strikingly similar to Maya's. By the time Julian arrived in Japan, Marie had completed the program and left, but a professor remembered her clearly. Extraordinary talent, he told Julian, but always so cautious. She wore sunglasses even indoors, avoided photographs. When we planned an exhibition of student work, she withdrew hers at the last minute after learning a Western art collector would attend. Each discovery left Julian more certain that Maya was deliberately avoiding detection, yet periodically undertook risks to leave him clues. But 8 years into his search, fatigue began to set in. Not of looking for her, he would never stop, but of living in suspension, waiting for a resolution that might never come. Caroline Hayes, Julian's mother, and a woman who had always supported his search for Maya, was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. As Julian sat by her hospital bed, she took his hand and spoke with the directness that had always been her way. "I need to know you'll live, Julian, really live, not just exist in this limbo you've created." "I'm fine, Mother," he assured her. But the lie felt hollow, even to his own ears. Caroline's gaze was unwavering. "I never told you this, but I loved someone before your father. When it ended, I thought my world had too." She paused, gathering strength. But life continued. "I found new purpose, new joy, different, but no less real." "What are you asking me to do?" Julian whispered. "Consider the possibility of a different happiness than the one you planned. Maya would want that for you?" Caroline's words echoed in Julian's mind in the months following her death. For the first time, he began to consider what moving forward might look like. Not forgetting Maya, never that, but perhaps opening himself to new possibilities while continuing his search. In this more receptive state of mind, Julian reluctantly agreed to meet Natalie Winters, the daughter of his father's oldest friend. Richard, still grieving Caroline and worried about his son, had arranged the introduction with uncharacteristic sensitivity. "Just dinner," Richard said. "She's brilliant. Harvard Law, working with the UN on human rights cases. Not some socialite looking for your money." To Julian's surprise, he found Natalie easy to talk to. 34, with a quick mind and dry humor, she had experienced her own loss, a fiancé who died in a humanitarian mission. Perhaps their shared understanding of grief created a foundation for genuine conversation. "I don't date," Julian told her bluntly over dessert. "There's someone, it's complicated." Natalie nodded. "The woman who disappeared on your wedding day. I've heard the rumors." At his stiffened expression, she added, "I'm not interested in rumors, Julian, or in romantic complications, frankly. My work keeps me traveling most of the year, but when I'm in town, it might be nice to have dinner with someone who doesn't expect me to be over Thomas's death." Their arrangement began simply. Occasional dinners when Natalie was in New Orleans, conversations about everything except their respective losses. Julian found himself appreciating her sharp intelligence and commitment to justice. She never asked about Maya, and he never offered details, but the space between them held the understanding of two people who carried invisible wounds. After a year of this careful friendship, Julian's father suffered a major stroke. In the hospital waiting room, Natalie appeared with coffee and quiet support, staying through the night as doctors worked to save Richard Hayes. When they finally emerged with cautiously optimistic news, Julian surprised himself by reaching for her hand. She squeezed back, a simple human connection that felt both foreign and necessary. As Richard recovered slowly, often confusing past and present, he frequently mistook Natalie for Caroline when she visited. "You two should set a date," he told them during one lucid moment. "Life's too short for waiting." Later, in the hospital corridor, Julian apologized for his father's assumption. Natalie looked at him thoughtfully. people make arrangements for all sorts of reasons, Julian. Some marry for love, some for companionship, some for family expectations. She paused. I'm not looking for a great passion. I had that, and losing it nearly destroyed me. But I do want a family someday, with someone I respect and trust. The implied suggestion hung between them, a partnership built on mutual understanding rather than romantic love. A practical arrangement that would satisfy Richard's wish to see his son settled, provide Julian with a socially acceptable reason to stop deflecting matchmaking attempts, and give Natalie the stability she wanted without the vulnerability of giving her heart again. After weeks of consideration, Julian proposed the idea formally: marriage as a partnership between friends who cared for each other with clearly defined expectations and freedoms. Natalie, pragmatic as always, suggested a prenuptial agreement that protected both their interests and a timeline for starting a family through adoption. "And if Maya returns?" she asked directly. Julian appreciated her honesty. "I don't know," he admitted. "But after 9 years, I have to consider the possibility that she can't or won't come back." Their engagement made the society pages, the billionaire CEO finally moving on after being left at the altar nearly a decade earlier. Julian found himself going through the motions of planning a small, elegant wedding. He chose a venue deliberately unlike St. Michael's Cathedral, selected a ring nothing like the one he had given Maya. Yet even as he moved forward with these plans, Julian maintained his search. Something in him could not, would not, believe that Maya had simply abandoned their love. The paintings, the clues, the careful way she had disappeared, all suggested a purpose, a reason. And until he knew that reason, a part of him would always belong to her. 3 weeks before his wedding to Natalie, Julian attended a charity art auction benefiting children affected by conflicts in developing nations. He moved through the crowded gallery mechanically, bidding generously but paying little attention to the artwork itself, until a flicker of movement in a shadowed corner caught his eye. Chapter 7. The Gallery Encounter. The charity auction was a glittering affair. New Orleans elite gathered among expensive art and flowing champagne. Julian navigated the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and making appropriate small talk while his mind remained elsewhere. After nearly a decade of these events, he had perfected the art of being present while absent, of smiling while scanning every room, every gathering. For a face he still searched for in crowds. Tonight felt different somehow. A strange electricity in the air, an inexplicable tightness in his chest that had persisted since morning. He was discussing a potential donation with the event organizer when movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. A woman in a wheelchair partially hidden behind a large sculpture near the back exit. His breath caught in his throat. Something about her posture, the way she held her head slightly tilted while studying a painting, a mannerism so distinctly familiar it made his heart stutter. The woman's hair was shorter now, cropped close to her head in a style Maya had never worn. Her frame was thinner, more fragile than in his memories. Logic told him it couldn't be her, that his mind was playing cruel tricks as it had countless times before. Yet something deeper than reason, something primal in his soul, recognized her immediately. His hands began to tremble, and he abandoned his conversation mid-sentence, drawn toward her like a compass finding true north after years of disorientation. Julian excused himself mid-conversation and moved toward her, heart pounding. As he approached, the woman seemed to sense his presence and began to wheel toward the exit. Her movements became urgent, almost panicked. "Maya?" he called, his voice barely audible even to himself. She froze, but didn't turn. For a moment, neither. Moved, Julian afraid to approach further and frighten her away, the woman seemingly caught between flight and surrender. "Maya," he said again, closer now, his voice steadier than his racing heart. 10 years of imagined reunions had not prepared him for this moment. When she finally turned, time seemed to stop. The shock of recognition nearly brought Julian to his knees. Her face was thinner, almost gaunt, with hollows where there had once been softness. A jagged scar traced her left cheekbone like a pale lightning bolt against her dark skin. But her eyes, those expressive amber-flecked eyes that had seen into his soul from their first meeting, were unmistakably Maya's, though now shadowed with a wariness that broke his heart. For a suspended moment, they simply stared at each other, a decade of separation collapsing into a single breath. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice rough as if seldom used. "You shouldn't have seen me." Before Julian could respond, she tried to wheel around him toward the exit. Acting on instinct, he gently caught the handle of her wheelchair. "Please," he said. 10 years, Maya, 10 years of searching, of wondering if you were alive. Don't disappear again." Around them, the auction continued, oblivious to the reunion. Unfolding in their midst, Maya glanced around nervously, clearly afraid of being noticed. "There's a private viewing room down the hall," Julian said, recognizing her anxiety. "Just give me 5 minutes, please." The conflict in her eyes was painful to witness, but finally she nodded once, allowing him to guide her wheelchair away from the crowd. As they moved through the gallery, Julian noticed how she kept her head down, how she flinched when someone looked their way. The Maya he had known had moved through the world with confident grace. This woman carried herself like someone accustomed to remaining invisible. In the private viewing room, surrounded by paintings waiting to be auctioned, they faced each other. In silence, Julian took her in, the wheelchair that explained her difficulty eluding him, the faint scar on her cheek, the way her hands trembled slightly in her lap, but also the familiar, determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the essence of the woman he had never stopped loving. "You're engaged," Maya said finally, nodding toward the newspaper on a side table, open to the society page, announcing his upcoming wedding to Natalie. "I didn't mean to disrupt your life. I just wanted to see you one last time." "Disrupt my life?" Julian repeated, incredulous. "Maya, you are my life. These past 10 years have been existence, not living." He knelt beside her wheelchair, close but not touching her. "What happened? Why did you leave? Where have you been?" Maya closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "It's complicated, Julian." "I have time," he said simply. A sad smile touched her lips. "But I don't. Being here is dangerous for both of us, but especially for you." "Dangerous?" "Maya, whatever trouble you're in, I can help. My resources, my connections." "This isn't something your money can fix," she interrupted, a flash of the old Maya breaking through. "Some people are beyond buying off." Julian studied her face, seeing the fear beneath her composed exterior. "Then tell me, let me understand. You owe me that much." For a moment he thought she would refuse, would wheel away and disappear from his life again. Instead, tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "I do owe you that." In the private viewing room, Maya's story unfolded like a nightmare. On their wedding morning, while she was getting ready in the bridal suite, she had received a call from an FBI agent named Daniel Sullivan. "He told me my sister Kira's husband Marcus had connections to a drug cartel," Maya explained, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "I'd always been wary of him. There was something about his wealth that never added up with his import business. Kira had confided her suspicions to me months before, but I had no idea how deep it went." Julian listened, piecing together fragments he had discovered during his search. The money that paid off your student loans and Nana Ruby's medical bills. Maya nodded. Blood money. Marcus had been laundering cartel funds through art purchases at galleries across the country. But what did this have to do with us? With our wedding? Julian asked, still not understanding the connection. Maya's hands tightened in her lap. 3 months before our wedding, Hayes International acquired a shipping company that had been the cartel's main transport method for moving product along the Gulf Coast. Your reorganization of the company eliminated their smuggling routes and cost them millions. Understanding dawned on Julian's face. The Meridian acquisition, but that was just business. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, Maya interrupted, but they didn't care. Agent Sullivan showed me surveillance photos, wiretap transcripts. The cartel had put you on a hit list. They were planning to make an example of you. Her voice broke. At our wedding. The horror of what might have happened, gunmen opening fire in a cathedral filled with their loved ones, struck Julian like a physical blow. Why didn't you tell me? We could have postponed, gone to the authorities together. The FBI had infiltrated the organization, but needed more time to gather evidence against the leadership. Sullivan made it clear. If I told you, if I told anyone, they would know there was a leak and the whole operation would collapse. Maya looked up, her eyes pleading for understanding. He said the only way to save you was for me to disappear completely, make it look like I'd abandoned you, so they'd think there was no connection between us. But after the FBI operation was complete, you could have come back, Julian argued. Maya shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her face. That was the promise that kept me going those first terrible months. Just 6 months, Sullivan would say. Then it became a year, then 2. The operation kept expanding. Every time Sullivan promised it was almost over, they discovered new connections, new players. She paused, the memory clearly painful. By the 3rd year, I'd established a small life for myself in Buenos Aires, teaching art under a false name. I even dared to hope I might soon be free. Her hands tightened on the wheelchair's armrests. Then everything collapsed. There was a leak in the operation. Names of informants got out. Marcus was killed in his driveway, and the cartel knew someone had betrayed them. Maya's voice dropped almost to a whisper. Sullivan arrived at my apartment at midnight. I had 20 minutes to pack before they moved me to Bangkok under a new identity. Elena Cortez died that night, and Marie Benoit was born. And that's when you lost your legs, Julian said softly, the timeline finally aligning with his discoveries. His mind flashed to the painting postmarked from Bangkok, remembering how the brushstrokes had seemed different, less fluid. Now he understood why. Maya nodded, her expression distant as if seeing it again. Car bomb outside a market, it wasn't meant for me. Wrong place, wrong time. I remember the flash, the deafening sound, then waking up 3 days later in a hospital with Sullivan beside my bed instead of... Her voice broke for the first time. Instead of you. She drew a steadying breath. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. I didn't feel lucky. 7 surgeries in 4 months. When I could finally be moved, Sullivan relocated me again. Time to Cape Town. After that, I never stayed anywhere longer than 6 months. A bitter smile touched her lips. The perfect punishment for taking away their business. They took away my ability to have a normal life. Took away my art for a while too. My hands wouldn't stop shaking for almost a year. Had to learn to paint differently, had to learn to do everything differently. The paintings, Julian said, understanding dawning. You sent them to let me know. You were alive. I shouldn't have, Maya admitted. Sullivan would have had my head if he knew, but I couldn't bear thinking you believed I'd just abandoned you. I needed some way, however small, to tell you I still, she trailed off, still loved me, Julian finished. Maya met his gaze directly for the first time. I never stopped, not for a single day. The truth hung between them. A love that had endured separation, danger and loss, yet remained unbroken. Julian moved closer, gently taking her hand. I never stopped searching for you, never stopped loving you. But you're engaged, Maya reminded him, glancing again at the newspaper. You've built a new life, as you should have. Julian shook his head. Natalie and I have an arrangement based on mutual respect and practical considerations. My heart has always been yours. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. It doesn't matter now. I came back because Sullivan finally told me it was safe. Marcus's bosses had been convicted, the cartel operation dismantled. I wanted to see you one last time, before leaving again. She gestured to her wheelchair, but not like this, not as someone you would pity. Julian's eyes flashed with sudden anger. Is that what you think? That I loved you for your ability to walk, for your physical perfection? He took her face gently in his hands. I loved your mind, your courage, your heart. Those things haven't changed. Everything has changed, Maya insisted. I'm not the woman you were going to marry. I live with chronic pain. I have nightmares. I've done things to survive that I'm not proud of. And I'm not the man you were going to marry either, Julian countered. I'm harder. I've made compromises I once would have considered unthinkable. I've lived with an emptiness at my core for a decade. He held her gaze steadily. But one thing hasn't changed. I love you, present tense, the woman you are now, not a memory of who you were. Before Maya could respond, the door to the private room opened and an auction staff member appeared. Mr. Hayes, they're asking for you to present the final lot. Julian stood, mind racing. Tell them I've been called away on an emergency. Looking back at Maya, he added, don't leave, please. We need more time. After the employee left, Maya looked up at Julian, conflict evident in her expression. I shouldn't stay. It's not fair to you or to your fiancé. Let me worry about what's fair, Julian said. Just promise you won't disappear again. Not until we've had a chance to really talk. After a long moment, Maya nodded. I'm staying at the Bellamy Hotel, room 412. Tomorrow morning, Julian promised, we'll figure this out together. As they parted, both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The truth had finally emerged from a decade of shadows, bringing with it both pain and the first fragile hope that perhaps, despite everything, their story wasn't over. Chapter 9. Unshaken Love. Julian barely slept that night, his mind racing, with all that Maya had revealed and all that remained unspoken between them. By dawn, he had reached a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. Before he could second-guess himself, he called Natalie and asked to meet her for breakfast. At a quiet cafe far from their usual haunts, Julian told Natalie everything about finding Maya, about the danger she had faced to protect him, about the love that had never died despite a decade of separation. He expected anger or hurt, but Natalie listened with the same calm thoughtfulness she brought to her legal cases. When he finished, silence stretched between them. Natalie studied her coffee cup for a long moment before meeting his gaze. You're in love with her, she said, not a question. Yes, Julian admitted, I never stopped. And now you want to end our engagement. Her voice was carefully neutral, but Julian caught the slight tightening of her fingers around her cup. I don't want to hurt you, he said softly. Our friendship means too much. Natalie laughed, a short sound without humor. That's the problem, isn't it? Friendship, respect, compatibility, everything a good marriage needs, except passion. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I convinced myself it was enough. Natalie. No, let me finish. She took a steadying breath. My colleagues thought I was crazy to enter a marriage of convenience with a man clearly haunted by his past. But I understood that kind of grief. After Thomas died, I didn't want grand passion either. I wanted safety. predictability. Her eyes met his again, clearer now. But watching you yesterday after you saw her, you came alive in a way I've never seen before, and I realized I've been cheating both of us by settling for less. I'm sorry, Julian said, meaning it deeply. You deserve someone who feels that way about you. Natalie was quiet for a moment. I'm not actually sure I want that anymore. That kind of love, it's terrifying. Look what it's cost both of you. She reached across the table to touch his hand briefly. But I do want more than what we had. They parted with a complexity of emotions, regret, relief, genuine affection, and a touch of grief for what might have been in different circumstances. Julian promised his continued support for her legal foundation, and Natalie wished him happiness, with a hard-won sincerity that humbled him. By mid-morning, Julian stood outside room 412 at the Bellamy Hotel, his heart pounding as it had on the day he first proposed to Maya. When she opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, followed by a guarded hope. You came, she said, wheeling back to allow him inside. I told you I would. Julian entered the modest hotel room, noting the packed suitcase on the bed. You were planning to leave. Maya nodded. I thought it would be easier that way, for both of us. Julian sat in the chair across from her wheelchair, leaning forward to take her hands. I ended my engagement to Natalie this morning. Shock registered on Maya's face. Julian, no, you didn't need to. Yes, I did, he interrupted gently. Because I'm still in love with you, Maya. I never stopped. And I think, despite everything, you still love me too. Tears filled Maya's eyes. Of course I do. But love isn't always enough. My life is complicated now. I have medical needs, limitations. And I have resources, determination, and a decade of missing you, Julian countered. Nothing about your condition changes how I feel. It's not just my legs, Maya admitted. The trauma. There are days I can barely function, days when the fear comes back so strongly I can't leave my room. Julian nodded. Then those will be the days we stay in, together. A glimmer of the old Maya sparked in her eyes. You're as stubborn as ever. Only about things that matter, Julian replied, moving from the chair to kneel beside her wheelchair. Maya Bennett, 10 years ago we were going to make vows to each other in sickness and health, for better or worse. I'm ready to make those vows now. Not despite what's happened, but because of it. Because I've seen the strength and courage with which you've faced unimaginable challenges, and it only makes me love you more. From his pocket, Julian withdrew a small velvet box. Not the one from a decade ago, but a new one containing a ring he had commissioned that morning. The simple platinum band held a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, arranged in the pattern of their special constellation. This isn't a proposal born of young love or optimistic dreams, Julian said quietly. This is a promise made with full knowledge of how difficult life can be, how precious each moment together truly is. Maya stared at the ring, then back at Julian's face. Are you sure? Really sure? I have never been more certain of anything. Julian replied, I never loved your body, Maya. I loved your heart, your soul, your courage. And those things are stronger now than ever. With trembling fingers, Maya touched the ring but didn't take it. I need time, Julian. Not to decide if I love you. I do, with everything I am. But to be sure I'm strong enough for this life, for being in the public eye, for all that comes with being your wife. Julian nodded, understanding her hesitation. Take all the time you need. I've waited 10 years, I can wait longer. But not from different continents, different lives. Stay in New Orleans. Let me help you build a new studio, adaptable to your needs. The Maya Bennett Foundation has been funding artists with disabilities for years, become its director, its inspiration. For the first time, A genuine smile lit Maya's face. "You've kept the foundation going all this time. It was my way of keeping you present in the world," Julian admitted. "Even when I couldn't find you, I could ensure your spirit continued to create beauty and opportunity." That afternoon, instead of leaving New Orleans as planned, Maya agreed to move into a guest house on Julian's property. Close enough for them to rebuild their relationship, yet with the independence she needed to regain her confidence. Julian arranged for the country's best physical therapists and adaptive technology specialists to help her reclaim her art and her independence. The path forward wasn't smooth. While Maya agreed to stay in New Orleans, the first weeks in the guest house were marked by nightmares that left her screaming in the darkness. Julian would rush over in the middle of the night, only to find her locked in her bathroom, unwilling to let anyone see her in such a vulnerable state. "I need to handle this myself," she insisted through the door one particularly bad night. "I've been handling it myself for years." "But you don't have to anymore," Julian answered, sitting on the floor outside the bathroom until dawn, when she finally emerged, exhausted but composed. Physical therapy sessions often ended in frustration. "I hate that you're seeing me like this," Maya snapped one afternoon after a particularly difficult session left her in tears. "Like what? Strong, determined, human?" Julian countered gently. Progress came in small moments. The first morning, Maya wheeled herself to the main house for breakfast without being asked. The day she agreed to let Julian's driver take them to the French Quarter. The afternoon she asked for art supplies to be moved into the sunroom of the guest house. For weeks, she painted with the door closed, refusing to let Julian see her work. He respected her privacy, understanding that her art had always been where she processed her deepest emotions. Meanwhile, he arranged for subtle adaptations to her living space, counters and workstations at the right height, special brushes for days when her hands trembled too much to use conventional ones, a custom wheelchair that could navigate the gardens they were redesigning together. 3 months after moving in, Maya finally invited Julian to see her new work. The paintings took his breath away, not just landscapes from places she had hidden, but powerful expressions of trauma, fear, courage, and resilience. One canvas showed a woman's silhouette fragmented into shards, each reflecting a different city. Another depicted hands reaching across a chasm, fingers almost but not quite touching. The most striking was a self-portrait showing Maya as she was now, wheelchair and all, with translucent wings emerging from her shoulders, not as fantasy, but as metaphor for the freedom she was slowly reclaiming. Julian struggled for words adequate to express their impact. "Ugly? Depressing?" Maya suggested, vulnerability evident in her voice. "Revolutionary," Julian said firmly. "You're showing what survival really looks like. Not some inspirational story where trauma becomes a neat life lesson, but the messy, complicated reality of rebuilding yourself." 2 weeks later, when the director of a small gallery specializing in works by artists with disabilities visited, Maya agreed to show her paintings. The resulting exhibition, titled Fragmented Journeys, drew critical acclaim and moved many viewers to tears. Julian watched in awe as Maya spoke openly about her experiences, no longer hiding, but transforming her suffering into connection. 6 months after their reunion, on a warm evening scented with jasmine, Julian and Maya sat together on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the garden. Her head rested against his shoulder, their hands intertwined in the comfortable silence they had rediscovered. "I found something today," Maya said suddenly, reaching for the sketchbook beside her. She opened it to reveal a detailed drawing of Julian as he had looked 10 years ago, standing at the altar of St. Michael's. "I've been drawing you from memory all these years. Hundreds of sketches hidden in books, under mattresses, anywhere Sullivan wouldn't find them." Julian's throat tightened with emotion. "Maya, She turned to face him fully. I realized something. For a decade, I've been drawing the past, preserving what was lost, but I haven't drawn our future. She took a deep breath. I think I'm ready to start, if you still want that. Without words, Julian removed the ring from his pocket, the one he had carried every day since finding her again. Maya's eyes filled with tears as she held out her hand. No grand gestures needed between them, just the quiet certainty of two souls who had found their way back to each other against impossible odds. Their second wedding bore little resemblance to the elaborate cathedral ceremony planned a decade earlier. Instead, they gathered in the lush garden behind Nana Ruby's old house, now lovingly maintained by Maya's cousins. Only their closest family and friends attended, those who had supported Julian's search and those who had protected Maya's secrets. Kira, now widowed and rebuilding her own life, stood as Maya's matron of honor, their relationship healing through shared understanding of loss and redemption. The garden was transformed, with fairy lights woven through the trees and fragrant jasmine climbing trellises. Maya had insisted on painting the invitations herself, each one unique, featuring a small element from their journey together. Maya wore a dress of her own design, collaborating with a designer who specialized in adaptive fashion, a flowing creation of ivory silk that draped elegantly around her wheelchair. The chair itself had been transformed into a work of art, decorated with the same wildflowers that filled the garden and ribbons hand-painted with fragments of their love story. Julian waited beneath an arch of jasmine and roses, his face reflecting a joy so complete it moved even the most stoic guests to tears. As Maya's father wheeled her down the petal-strewn path, Julian stepped forward to meet them halfway, a symbolic gesture acknowledging that their journey had always been about meeting each other where they were, not where they thought they should be. Their vows, written together during quiet evenings of reflection, spoke not of perfect love, but of enduring love, not of flawless futures, but of facing whatever came together. I choose you, Maya said, her voice clear and strong. Not once in a cathedral a decade ago, but every day since, even when oceans separated us. I choose you now, knowing the fullness of both joy and pain. I choose you for all the days to come. I choose you, Julian responded, kneeling to be at eye level with her wheelchair, through absence and presence, through searching and finding. I choose your courage, your artist's heart, your warrior's spirit. I choose us, not the dream we once had, but the reality we've fought to create. As they exchanged rings, Julian's a simple platinum band, Maya's the constellation ring she had finally accepted, Agent Sullivan, now retired and invited at Maya's insistence, whispered to the guest beside him, "In 15 years with the Bureau, I've never seen a love strong enough to survive what theirs did." The evening unfolded with food prepared by Maya's mother and music from her father's high school jazz band. There was laughter and dancing, with Julian occasionally lifting Maya from her wheelchair for brief moments of swaying together under the string lights. But the most poignant moment came when Julian unveiled his wedding gift, a painting he had created showing two paths winding separately through darkness before converging in light. "It's not technically very good," he admitted, with a self-deprecating smile. "I'm still a better businessman than artist." Maya touched the canvas reverently. "It's perfect because it's true." In the years that followed, Julian and Maya built a life that honored both their shared past and their hard-won present. They established the Bennett Hayes Foundation, providing arts education for disadvantaged youth and support for artists with disabilities. Maya's work gained international recognition, her exhibitions exploring themes of resilience and rebirth, drawing acclaim from critics who had once dismissed her. Julian continued leading Hayes International, but with a new focus on accessibility initiatives and ethical business practices. Together, they created a home that was both a showcase for art and a sanctuary for healing, a place where Maya's physical therapy equipment stood alongside Julian's business awards, where adaptive tools shared space with luxury items, where everything reflected their commitment to authentic living. They chose not to have biological children, instead opening their home to foster children with disabilities, providing both love and opportunities many had never imagined possible. Their first foster daughter, a 15-year-old aspiring photographer who had lost a leg to cancer, eventually became the Foundation's youth program director after college. On each anniversary, they upheld two traditions. First, they visited St. Michael's Cathedral, not with sadness for the wedding that never happened there, but with gratitude for the journey that had ultimately brought them together with deeper understanding. Second, Julian created a new painting of their hands, intertwined, adding to a gallery wall that chronicled their continuing story. And each night, as they prepared for sleep, Maya in her specialized bed, Julian beside her, they whispered the words that had carried them through a decade apart and would sustain them through whatever challenges still lay ahead. I choose you today and always. In their love, they had discovered a truth more powerful than the forces that had tried to separate them, that love is not defined by perfect circumstances, but by perfect commitment, not by ease, but by endurance, not by what is lost, but by what remains unshaken through it all.